They called it teenage rebellion. She called it the only way out. When 17-year-old Lila Jennings lost her older brother in a late-night car crash, she didn't just lose her sibling, she lost her shield, the only person who ever stood between her and the man her mother had married. The house felt bigger after that night, but not in the way people think. It wasn't space, it was exposure. Suddenly, it was just her and David Jennings, her stepfather, a man whose presence was as heavy as it was constant. At first, he played the role well. He offered to drive her to school, brought her coffee in the mornings, sat across from her at the kitchen table, smiling in a way that never reached his eyes. But when her mother's work trips got longer, so did the nights. He started deciding where she went, who she saw, what she wore. When she pushed back, he'd remind her she owed him for keeping this family together. By the time she turned 18, the control had calcified into something worse, something that stole the air from her lungs. And when he told her he planned to send her away to a school for troubled girls, something inside her locked into place. She didn't see a guardian. She saw a warden. 2 months later, paramedics were called to the Jennings home. David lay on the kitchen floor, pale, sweating, and unable to speak. He never left the hospital. The cause of death was listed as acute poisoning. No signs of forced entry, no theft, just a man who stopped breathing, and a stepdaughter who stood in the doorway, watching. At trial, the prosecutor read from Lila's private journal, a raw, chilling record of years of fear, resentment, and a plan she'd been perfecting in silence. But it was her final entry that left the courtroom frozen. I didn't poison him because I hated him. I poisoned him because I finally wanted to sleep without listening for his footsteps. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We read everyone. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Lila's mother, Karen, had met David at a neighborhood barbecue 3 years before the crash. He was charming in a way that felt deliberate, like every smile was rehearsed. People said he was a good man, a steady man, someone who'd bring stability to a single mother's life. Karen believed them. Lila didn't. Still, she tried to adapt. She laughed when she was supposed to, said, "Thank you," when he brought home little gifts, a silver bracelet, a book on becoming a proper young lady. But behind closed doors, David had rules: no locked bedroom doors, no phone calls after 9, no friends over without his approval. And whenever Lila questioned him, he'd tilt his head and smile, the kind of smile that said he knew she wouldn't win. Her brother Aaron was the buffer. He was older, louder, unafraid to push back. If David got too close, Aaron would appear in the doorway. If David's questions dug too deep, Aaron would change the subject. And as long as her brother was there, Lila could breathe. Then came the crash. Rain-slicked roads. A drunk driver who never hit the brakes. One phone call that ripped the center out of her world. Aaron was gone. And just like that, so was her shield. Karen buried herself in work to cope, taking overnight shifts whenever she could. David stepped in, not to comfort, but to occupy. He cooked her meals, yes, but sat across from her as she ate, watching every bite. He started checking in when she showered, knocking without waiting for an answer. He'd stand too close in the kitchen, his hand brushing her arm like it was nothing. Soon, he was driving her everywhere, picking her clothes, commenting on her appearance in ways that made her stomach tighten. If she stayed in her room too long, he'd come in uninvited under the pretense of just talking. He kept saying he was only looking out for her, but it never felt like protection. It felt like possession. By her senior year, Lila had stopped bringing friends home. She deleted social media. She walked through school hallways with her shoulders tight, scanning for anyone who might ask the wrong questions. She became invisible by design. But invisibility came with a price. Inside her head, the resentment was growing roots. Every time he called her princess, every time his hand lingered a second too long, every time she saw him smile at her mother like he was doing nothing wrong, the roots dug deeper. Then, on her 18th birthday, he gave her a gift. A small velvet box. Inside was a gold necklace with a charm shaped like a key. "To your future," he said, fastening it around her neck himself. She smiled for him, but her jaw ached from holding it in place. That night, she wrote in her journal, "A key to my future. He has no idea it's going to open a door he can't close." She had no plan yet, but the thought was there, waiting. Lila didn't cry when her mother told her that David was now the rock of the family. She didn't argue. She didn't roll her eyes. She just nodded and started asking questions. She wanted to know his schedule, his habits, what he liked to eat. She volunteered to handle dinner more often, to help out. She offered to run errands for him, to organize his desk, to help with his personal paperwork. To Karen, it looked like maturity, a daughter and stepfather finally finding common ground. But Lila knew better. She wasn't connecting. She was studying. She began keeping a journal, not a diary of feelings, but a logbook. She wrote down every meal he ate, how often he drank, what time he went to bed. She noted when her mother was home, when she was on overnight shifts, and how much David liked his nightly glass of warm milk. The closer the months drew to spring, the more her observations shifted from facts to plans. One entry read simply, "One drop too much is all it takes to make him sleep." She began experimenting in the kitchen, small doses of over-the-counter sleep aids in her own tea, testing how long it took before she felt them. A second test with crushed herbs her grandmother once used for nerves. She told herself she was just curious, but curiosity had an endpoint. When Karen mentioned taking a 2-night work trip out of town, Lila's pulse quickened. She smiled, told her mother she'd be fine. David even chimed in, promising to keep her safe. The first night, nothing happened. She made his dinner, sat across from him, let him ramble about bills and neighborhood gossip. She watched his hands, the same hands that had lingered too long on her shoulders, brushed her hip as they passed in the hallway. She pretended to laugh at his jokes, but the second night, she made something special. A creamy stew, his favorite, paired with that warm milk he liked so much before bed. An hour after dinner, David complained of feeling tired. He blamed the long day. She offered to get him a blanket and led him to the couch. He was asleep before the credits of the TV show finished rolling. At 2:46 a.m., a neighbour's security camera caught a faint light flicker in the Whitman, now Holloway, kitchen. At 3:02 a.m., the same camera recorded a shadow moving slowly across the backyard toward the tool shed. By dawn, David Holloway would never wake up again. The police had suspicions from the very beginning, but without proof, suspicion meant nothing. That changed one quiet Thursday morning when a janitor at the local courthouse handed over a small leather-bound journal he claimed to have found in a dumpster behind an abandoned storage unit. Inside, every page was filled in tight, slanted handwriting. Dates, times, conversations, dreams, fears, and then, in the later entries, plans. It was her handwriting. She never admitted the crime outright. No, I did it. No step-by-step instructions. But each word dripped with the psychology of a young woman living in a house where fear never left the walls. She wrote of his control, how he tracked her movements, how his voice could go from calm to cutting in a single breath. She wrote of nights she counted the seconds until morning, and mornings she wished would never come. And then came the sentence the prosecution read aloud to the jury. If the only way to breathe again is to make sure he never takes another breath, then I'll stop his before he stops mine. In court, she didn't look at him, not once. He sat in his wheelchair, thinner than anyone remembered, tubes running from his arms. His attorney argued that whatever she was writing was nothing more than emotional exaggeration, the venting of a grieving stepdaughter. But the state had more. Toxicology reports showed an uncommon compound in his bloodstream, one found in a specific type of herbal supplement. She had been ordering it for months under her friend's name. The levels in his system weren't enough to kill instantly, but taken daily, They could weaken a man until one night. His heart simply couldn't keep up. The defense called it circumstantial. The prosecutor called it deliberate. A forensic psychologist took the stand and, in a voice that never wavered, said, "She did not act in panic. She acted in patience. She was not consumed by rage. She was consumed by calculation." Then came the final blow. A video was recovered from her phone, recorded in the dim glow of her bedroom lamp. In it, she stared straight into the camera and whispered, "Freedom doesn't always mean leaving. Sometimes it means making sure they can never follow." 6 hours later, the jury returned. Guilty. 30 years without parole. She didn't flinch, didn't cry. She only exhaled, long and slow, like she'd been holding her breath for years and finally let it go. When reporters asked if she had any last words before being led away, she answered without looking back, "This isn't punishment. This is peace." He never testified, never once defended himself. He died quietly in the prison hospital less than a year later, his cause of death listed simply as complications from prior illness. Some say she smiled when she heard the news. Others say she didn't react at all. But the final line in her journal, the one sealed in evidence, said everything. "I didn't do it because I hated him. I did it because I refused to be his anymore."